I spend way too much time on the computer, so I'm gonna step away from the screen and draw a map the old school way with pen and ink. Pen and ink, not pen and ink. For this little map drawing, I'll be using a zebra G-nib. It's this little piece of shaped metal that you dip into ink, like a calligraphy pen, basically. For the ink, I'll be using Higgins Black Magic waterproof ink, and for the paper, some Strathmore vellum Bristol board. You'll need nice thick paper meant for drawing for this, like regular copy paper isn't gonna work with the nib and the India ink. And I've also got some paper towels ready for the inevitable mess that I will be making with all of this. And I guess if you want a pencil and an eraser too, you might need that, but I'm not using any of that for this map. I'll have links to everything I'm using down in the description. These tools, they might seem fancy, but they're old school, right? And they're not super expensive. The kind of problem is you have to buy them in multiples. You can't just get one little nib and holder and everything, but I think it's super worth it to just have fun playing with kind of old school drawing stuff, especially if you like making black and white line art illustrations or maps. Okay, let's jump into this map drawing. I'm not planning anything out. No list of locations, no pencil sketch, my usual process. I'm just dipping the pen, drawing on the paper. I started with the outlines of this island, and you can kind of see the line variety happening on the coastline. The cool thing about this G-nib pen is that you can press down super lightly, like don't press down at all, and you can get a really precise tiny line, or you can give it a little bit more pressure and the nib will flex open and let a little bit more ink out, creating a thicker line. And kind of the fun of using this stuff is learning how to control that thin to thick to thin line weight. Usually I would be switching back and forth between a bunch of different size micron pens, but with this one little nib, I can get all the variety and line weight that I need for this entire illustration. I guess the only downside is having to constantly dip the pen in the ink. I don't know, I wouldn't even call it a downside. It's kind of fun, like I'm drawing this fantasy map, even a little tiny one like this. It feels like I'm in some sort of ancient wizard's library, hunched over the desk drawing some fantastical place. Now, if you want to try out drawing with a nib like this, it doesn't have to be the G-nib. There's all kinds of different ones. I used to use a Hunt 107 and a Hunt 102 nib to draw comics all the time. But the key with a dip pen is that you have to get the right amount of ink on the nib. If you don't get enough, like if you don't dip the pen in far enough, you'll run out of ink really quick, and sometimes you might even be halfway through a line and the ink just stops. But if you get too much ink on the nib, you run the risk of it dumping out and getting a bunch of ink all over your drawing. And that's really not fun when that happens. So the way I fix that is to have a little sheet of scrap Bristol board paper right next to my drawing, and when I dip the pen, I'm just dipping the pen in all the way to the bottom of the ink bottle. I give it a little shake, like just a little whip of the pen to dump some of the excess ink off the nib, and then on the scrap paper I just make a few marks to make sure that the ink isn't going to dump out. Like if it does, it'll dump out onto the scrap sheet of paper and not my drawing. You might have also noticed that I keep the bottle of ink on the left-hand side of the drawing. I'm like reaching across the drawing to dip the pen in the ink, and that's really just a safety thing. You can keep the ink above the drawing or on the opposite side of your drawing hand, but if you keep it on the same side of your desk as your drawing hand, you're much more likely to bump into the bottle of ink and spill it everywhere. And when that happens, it really, really sucks. And with that sort of thing in mind, I'm mostly working from the top left to the bottom right. And that's because the ink takes a minute to dry and I don't want to smudge anything with my hand. Now, this drawing is pretty small, so my hand isn't really on the actual illustration that much, but if it was a bigger drawing, I would definitely be working on what's going on the top left and then moving across the top and then down and to the right as I go. I am notorious for smudging ink on my drawing because I just get in the zone and I don't think about where my hand is. I'm thinking about the drawing and not where the wet ink is, and I rub my fat, heavy hand through the wet ink. It happens all the time. Luckily, on this little small drawing, it's not going to happen. But lately, I've been a lot better. I'm trying to be a lot better, that when I get to a spot where the ink just needs to dry to sort of continue what I'm doing, I just take a step back and let it dry. No more contorting my wrist or trying to hold my hand up above the paper and sacrificing the comfort of drawing and making nice lines just to keep going around wet ink. It's just a bad idea all around. When I do take a break, I usually just wipe the nib off on a paper towel, making sure to clean off both sides. Sometimes I give the nib a little push to flex it open so I can wipe kind of the inside of the nib. I probably should use some hot water to make sure all the ink gets off. As you can tell, I haven't really done that with this nib. There's some dried ink on there already. If you do want to get the ink off of the nib, restore it completely, just give it a little spray with some Windex, and that'll get the dried waterproof ink off the metal nib. And really, if you take care of these nibs, they can last a long time. Eventually, you will notice that they get a little flexy, like the metal bends a little bit easier, and it makes it just a tiny bit harder to control the pressure, and that means it's a little bit harder to control the line weight. But really, these nibs have been engineered and produced over years and years, like hundreds of years. So there's these kind of amazing little pieces of technology. It's something so simple, but it's really amazing how it all works. And it's just a really cool tool for drawing. Okay, let's talk about this map. I'm having fun drawing these little icons and just experimenting with the pen, making little hatch marks and squiggles. And I've kind of forgotten how amazing this nib is for getting the really, really fine line and detail. Your brain kind of gets fooled that dipping in this kind of like big piece of plastic with a piece of metal attached into some ink and then putting it on the piece of paper, you kind of think that it's going to be this like big thick line, but it's amazing how small and precise of a line this thing really provides. Now, like I said, I haven't planned anything out. I'm kind of ended up making this vaguely Legend of Zelda looking map with a big Death Mountain and Hyrule Castle and the forest and the desert, all the typical stuff, right? I guess I tend to lean into what I know when I don't have a plan. And I think if I would have spent more time sketching out this map, I would have separated the areas a little bit more. I think I'll do a video at some point in the future about how you can draw the viewer's attention on maps using line weight and value and patterns. Basically, as I'm going, I'm noticing I didn't pay enough attention to those three things, and the map is looking a little bit jumbled and hard to decipher at first glance. Like, you can tell what's going on when you really look at it, but if you're zoomed out just looking at the whole thing, the areas kind of blend in together in a way that's not as satisfying as I would have liked. One thing I do like is the style of these mountains and all the little hatch marks. They feel really rocky, but they aren't really difficult to draw at all. I mean, nothing on this map is really that hard, just a lot of little scratches and squiggles, honestly. If you do need help learning how to draw maps, I always say maps are a great place to learn how to draw because it's just really simple little icons repeated over and over again to make up a really detailed, cool looking illustration. But if you need help learning, I have tons of videos on this channel, as well as some fun guidebooks in my online shop. In fact, if you order any of the Flick Silver Pen drawing guides from my shop this week, the week that this video comes out, you'll have a chance that I'll throw in this map illustration for free. I rarely get rid of my artwork. I never really sell originals or anything like that, but this is just a fun little kind of sketch, tiny map illustration, so I think it'd be fun to send it to someone, especially someone who's looking to draw maps like this. Let me know what you think of this map down in the comments, and if you give drawing with the pen and ink a shot, I would love to see how it goes. It really is so much fun playing with these different kind of tools and this nib with the black India ink on the white Bristol board makes like the best illustrations, the solid black lines on the white paper. It's just my absolute favorite. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!